The terms were: 1. If a veterinarian determined the pet to be in poor health, or if it died of natural causes in 5 days from the adoption date, the adoption fee of $70 would be refunded. 2. The shelter would refund $20 if the animal were returned to the shelter for any other reason than poor health. 3. No refund would be given after 14 days from the date of the contract or for lost or stolen animals. 4. The shelter made no guarantee of the exact age, breed, health, or temperament of the animal, and that the adopter was to take full responsibility. 5. The adopter will get all legally required vaccinations and licenses for the animal. 6. The adopter was to provide total care and shelter and be devoted to the animal as a companion, and not let the animal be used for research purposes. 7. The adopter will return the animal directly to the shelter if they are no longer able to keep and care for it. It was not to be given away or sold. 8. If the animal was lost, then the shelter was to be contacted immediately in order to make any attempt to recover the animal. 9. The shelter, at any time within 1 year of the contract, may investigate to make sure all agreements of the contract have been maintained and that all the information provided by the adopter was accurate. 10. If there were any violations of the contract, the adopter would assume all legal fees. Sue and Rob read the contract thoroughly before signing it. They agreed to all the terms. Sue filled out information for the microchip that had been implanted in the kitten at the same time it was spayed. The chip was to help locate and identify the kitten. The counselor gave Sue a few pamphlets on pet ownership, just in case she had any more questions. Rob paid in cash for the adoption fee. He had won that argument with Sue. The counselor then informed Sue to keep an eye out for upper respiratory infections and suggested she take her to a vet within a week for vitamins and antibiotics that the facility, unfortunately, did not provide. She told Sue that spaying was a major surgery that involved removing the ovaries and even the uterus, so antibiotics were essential to get in the next several days to help the kitten heal and stay healthy. Sue thanked her for the extra info, and then the counselor asked one of the volunteers to go and get the kitten. A young male volunteer returned shortly with a sturdy cardboard carrying case, which had air holes in it, with the little kitten mewing from inside it. That was it. Signed, sealed, delivered, she was hers. Sue and Rob had stopped at the store on their way home as planned, to get kitty supplies. Rob was thrilled to be running the errand that he had been afraid he wouldn't get to. He had seen Sue's face. He knew he had been right after all. She hadn't admitted it, but she didn't need to. It was so obvious. He wasn't going to say, "I told you so." He was just happy that she was happy. Sue sat in the car with the cardboard carrier on her lap. She was peeking and sticking her fingers through the air holes to further introduce herself to the new addition to her life. Rob had seen that on his way back with a bag of goodies. He had gotten a few cat toys as well. He got a few balls filled with catnip and a string-dangling kind of toy for whatever she might prefer. He was glad to pay for that, too. Sue hadn't even brought it up that time. She was too distracted, in the best way. They were back at her apartment soon, and Sue slowly opened the top of the carrier to let the little girl see her new home. The kitten warily crawled out and walked around with her belly low to the ground, sniffing everything. After all the initial exploration had been done, Sue called her over to her by making kissing noises, and she held out her hand. The kitten ran right up to her fingertips, sniffed them, rubbed her face against them, and then began purring loud enough to hear it clearly from several feet away, where Rob was. He began setting the litter pan up on the far end of the living room, as far from the front door and kitchen as possible. It was not too far from the bathroom that they used themselves. He washed the food and water bowls in the kitchen sink and filled them up. Rob tried calling the kitten the way Sue had. Sue stopped playing with her to give her a chance to notice him and go see what he had for her. The kitten looked at him for a moment and then began lightly swatting at Sue's hand playfully again. "You'll show her where it all is," Rob said to Sue. She smiled, noticeably proud of how loyal the kitten already was to her. "All right," she said back to him. "Come on, little one." She had raised her voice for the kitten, and the kitten was reacting curiously. "Let's look at your food and your water and all your new toys and, most importantly, your new potty area." The kitten twitched her tail excitedly and followed Sue around all the new locations. "I'm going to give you guys some time to bond and go to Michelle's room for a while," he said. She looked up at him. "It could be your room, if you want it." She then picked up the string toy that the kitten was chasing speedily. Sue was very happily distracted and was speaking without any posturing or pretense. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about it, and you can move in if you want. Isn't that right, little girl?" she said to the oblivious kitten. "Do you want Rob to be your new daddy?" Was all he said while he seriously was considering it. You let me know, she said, never taking her eyes off the little bundle of fur. I've already thought it all through, though. I think it'd be great. You don't have that much stuff, except for movies that I want access to anyway, and you can stay here until you get a job and then help out with the rent. Your half should be cheaper than your place. Think about it. He was stunned and flattered and touched. I will. Thank you. He went to what may soon become his room and closed the door. Outside the room, he heard Sue's stomping footsteps running through the apartment, and then the tiny pitter-patter of little kitten feet chasing after. Sue had let out bellowing laughter with each cute thing the kitten was doing. He was smiling while listening to it all. He began to feel a little strange. He figured his hangover was catching up with him at last. Sue seemed to be over hers, or was too busy playing to notice or care any longer. He sat on the bed and went through his mail. He opened his bills. The electric bill was much lower for the past 2 months than it had ever been before. That was because he hadn't been staying recently to use much energy. He would write the check out later, when he went back to his place and got his checkbook. He could just pay the bill online, as the notice indicated. He was getting used to using the internet fast. He had his check card with him. He opened the phone bill and sighed deeply. He had forgotten that he had already gotten the first notice back along with his mother's check. There was a late fee. It was almost $5. He was irritated at that when he realized that the discount on his electric bill more than balanced things out in his favor. He took another deep breath and didn't just accept it. He found the ability to be grateful and the way the universe had balanced things out. His new attitude was working, and he would see that it continued to. Then he remembered that he owed the universe, or the fates, or the voice, or whoever, a payment. He had promised to give up cussing for 2 months if he got through his encounter with the dead fucker. He almost hadn't, but it had worked out in his favor. He owed a fee. Why that popped into his head at that particular moment, he wasn't sure. He would start paying up and start over every time he slipped. It seemed like a ridiculously low price to pay in hindsight. He thought more about moving in with Sue. He didn't think about it for too long. She had summed up everything, and it made sense. It would be mutually beneficial. He tried to think of a downside. He could only think of one. He opened the bedroom door to ask Sue about it. The kitten startled when the door opened and fluffed up all its fur to try to look menacing. It only made it more adorable. "Sorry, sweetie," he said. The fur went back down. Sue resumed playing a string game with her. "Sue?" he asked. "Yeah?" she responded. "You sure you wouldn't mind me taking over Michelle's room?" The kitten kept swatting at her. Sue was ignoring the playfulness for the first time since they had gotten home. She was already getting used to constantly being batted at and licked and scratched and chewed on, all in affectionate ways. "Not at all. If anyone is going to take that room over, I'd like it to be you. I don't mean to apply any pressure. You're not obliged to take it at all. I'll be fine either way." "You sure?" "Yes. I know her stuff will have to go, but I've been meaning to go through it and get rid of most of it anyway. I don't associate her with inanimate things. Well, not most of them. There are a few knickknacks I want to keep." "Okay, then. I'll take you up on it." "Hooray!" Sue jumped up. The kitten fluffed up again. "Oh, it's okay," Sue said to her. "It's good news. It's great news." "On one condition," he interrupted. She froze. "What?" "That you let me start paying my share retroactively right now. I have the money, and will have a job by the time I need more." "Oh, Rob," she began. He protested. "Deal or not?" "It's a deal." She ran over and hugged him. "It'll be equally your place. I'll be a great roommate, I promise." "I'm not even worried about that. You already have been. More than." Her brow suddenly furrowed. "Are you feeling all right? You look a little funny." "I'm fine. I think that last night is catching up with me." "Have you thought of a name for her yet?" He gestured at the kitten that was sitting and staring up at Sue. When Sue looked down and made eye contact with her and gave her approval, the kitten meowed and began climbing up her pant leg. "She's such a feisty little bitch, aren't you?" She was asking the kitten rhetorically. The kitten meowed to answer anyway and demanded to be held. Sue plucked her off her pants, and the kitten purred instantly in her arms, and then began gently nipping at her. "I think she's teething," Sue said to Rob. "I think she's just a rough-and-tumble kitty." He went to pet the top of her head, but she pulled away from his fingers and nuzzled into Sue. "Well, sugar and spice she is not." Sue laughed. "Well, maybe spice. She is spicy." "Yes, she is," Sue agreed. "Oh, maybe a spice. What about parsley, sage, rosemary, or thyme?" "Oh, that's so it! Rosemary!" "Rosemary is an herb, dumbass." Sue shook her head at him while looking down at the bundle in her arms. "Well, it's still a good name." "She's a little saucy, too," Sue offered. Well, why don't you just name her Ragu? That's much better, he said sarcastically. She rolled her eyes at him. Rosemary isn't a horrible name. Maybe it should start with the letter M since she's got one on her forehead. What about just Mary? Ew, Rob rejected. You're right. That sounds religious. She paused and then said, Marie? Still ew. Well, Rosemary is not very catchy for a cat name. What about Rosie? She's gray and black. Does she look like a Rosie to you? Does she look like a Rosemary to you? Sue rebutted. Yes, she does, he insisted. He spoke to the kitten in a baby voice and said, She looks like she could have given birth to the Antichrist if her widow uterus hadn't already been cut out, doesn't she? Sue let out quiet breaths of laughter. She's ignoring you, and so am I. Well, she's your cat. You should name her, he said at last. Sue held her up and looked into her eyes and kissed her on the nose. She examined her further. Damn it, now you've got me stuck on Rosemary. She hugged her tight to her chest again, but she began to squirm. The kitten jumped out of her arms to run around her new surroundings some more. Come back, Rosemary, Rob called after the kitten in an old man's voice. Be a mother to her. Pay no attention to her eyes. Her name is Sue, and she shall overthrow the mighty and lay waste their temples. She got the reference. Shut up. You're in Dubrovnik. I don't hear you. She retorted the pop culture reference perfectly. Rob was impressed. Don't make me go get the kitchen knife, she added. He groaned. Oh, you had to go and mess it up. He motioned at the kitten. Rosemary should be the one to go and get the kitchen knife. Sue laughed. Fine, Rosemary it is, but if it doesn't stick, I'm changing it. Okay. He let out a deep breath. I am feeling a little funny. I think I'll go take a hot shower. Sure. You don't look too good, really. Maybe you should go to bed after. Yes, Mother, he joked. She smiled when the kitten came running up to her, demanding either attention or food or both. All right, Rosemary, she looked at Rob. He smiled and looked pleased with the name usage. Let's go get you some undercooked meat, or at least some canned food for your little baby teeth, she said. While Sue was preoccupied, he went to go take his shower. He felt really off. He took a pair of boxers out of the suitcase to wear after he got clean. Hopefully he would feel clean. He felt like dirt and grit was running through his veins. He turned on just the hot water and waited for it to heat up. He looked at himself in the medicine cabinet mirror for a bit before it fogged up. He was horrified.